It is proposed in this series of talks that the inspired author of Genesis wishes us to see that the special manner in which Eve was created for Adam by God, being of one body, she was formed from his side, continued on, albeit in the fallen state, for a number of other blessed couples up to the time of Abraham, at which time it ended. While this is an extraordinary statement to make, that Adam was not the only man who was graced with his wife being formed from his side, but that it carried on for further generations of men unto the time of Abraham, albeit passed on in the fallen state of being subject to concupiscence and death. There is, however, it is proposed, overwhelming evidence in the book of Genesis to support this. This series of talks will continue to explore this evidence in Scripture. The fifth part of the series is entitled The Genealogy of Genesis chapter 5.
The fifth part of this series on the state of marriage, or more properly stated, the nuptial state in the early chapters of Genesis, is entitled The Genealogy in chapter 5 of Genesis. In the previous talks in this series, by way of review, it was seen that the first person, Adam, whom God created, was not created as male alone, but rather as male and female in the nuptial state. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Genesis 1, verse 27. The male and female, bride and groom, were truly created as one body, which by God's divine power separated to become two. Adam and his bride, later to be called Eve. This nuptial blessing was not only given to the first couple, but was in fact passed on to other blessed couples in the line of Cain and the line of Seth, Adam's children. Cain's descendants, however, lost this nuptial blessing later as a result of Lamech's sin of infidelity.
In the line of Cain, therefore, from the time of Lamech onwards, daughters were no longer formed from the side of their prospective husbands, but were now born from their mother's womb. This was a new state in God's order in the world. In Seth's line, however, this nuptial blessing of the Garden of Eden, albeit passed on in the fallen state, was preserved and would continue to grace the world, provided Seth's descendants remained faithful to the blessing that God had bestowed upon them. The evidence for this blessing is found in the important genealogy of Adam through Seth in Genesis chapter 5, verses 1 to 32. This genealogy is now shown on the screen. It will be shown in two halves.
In chapter 5 of Genesis, there is a very important genealogy presented which lists the names of every generation in the line of Adam through his son Seth up to the birth of Noah. 10 generations in all are recorded in the genealogy, which is carefully composed according to a predetermined structure and plan. For each generation in the genealogy, there is included a formula of phrases and words that is strictly adhered to. First, the father's name is given and his age at the time of his son's birth, the firstborn, whose name is also given. Second is mentioned the number of years the father lived after the birth of his son, during which time we are told he had other sons and daughters. Finally, adding up the years, we are told at what age the father died. For Christians today, we might find the reading of this genealogy repetitive and uninspiring, but not for the Hebrew mind. For the repetition in the genealogy is the high point of the entire narrative. It is in the constant echo, the continuous refrain, where the jewel is found. Something so precious is being preserved and guarded that such a repetitious order is required. The question that naturally follows is, What precisely is being recorded in this genealogy? What is so significant that it has to be repeated over and over again? Following the main points outlined in the previous talks, it is proposed that what is being preserved is the nuptial blessing of the Garden of Eden, which, although wounded or in the fallen state on account of Adam's sin, is still somewhat alive and preserved in the line of Seth up to the time of Noah. Let us now look at the evidence for this partially preserved nuptial state in the genealogy. In this regard, 4 points are noted.
These 4 points of note are as follows. 1. The firstborn son and his name in the genealogy. 2. The repetitious phrase, and had other sons and daughters. 3. The significant mention of Noah and his family, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And 4. The special format of the genealogy is found later again in Genesis, where it ends with Abraham. Let us look now at each of these 4 points in turn.
Number 1. The firstborn son and his name in the genealogy. The name in the genealogy of each firstborn son recorded is, it is proposed, not just a male name, but the name of both male and female, of both groom and bride, whom God has blessed and chosen for each other. This state which the genealogy presents is the wounded legacy earlier referred to that remains behind of the Garden of Eden. That this is so is seen in the introduction to the genealogy, which acts as the foundation to the entire series that follows. This introduction, found in Genesis chapter 5, verse 1 to 3, serves as the formulaic rule, what might be described as the soul of the genealogy, which is applied to each generation that follows throughout the entire passage. Genesis 5, 1 to 3 reads, "This is the book of the generation of Adam. In the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them, male and female, and blessed them, and called their name Adam, in the day when they were created. And Adam lived 130 years, and begot a son in his own image and likeness, and called his name Seth." We might pause here for a short moment, as some points of note in relation to verse 2 are offered on the screen.
You might wish to use the pause button to read this and the next slide shown on the screen. In particular, please read the important section which states that the Septuagint and the Vulgate translate the Hebrew term Adam in Genesis 5 verse 2 according to that sense denoting a person's name. This is a very important point.
What God had given to Adam as a nuptial blessing in the Garden of Eden, and according to verse 2, Adam is the name of the first couple, male and female, who were created in the image and likeness of God, was also passed on to Adam's son Seth. Seth, according to verse 3 in the introduction, was created in Adam's image and likeness. This is the key to the genealogy. The inspired author wishes us to see that Seth and his descendants received from Adam what Adam had received from God. And the blessing that Adam received from God was none other than the nuptial blessing referred to repeatedly throughout this series. The names Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, and so on throughout the genealogy are the names of both groom and bride in each respective generation, signifying their unity from the beginning as one body.
The second point of note on the genealogy is entitled "The repetitious phrase, and had other sons and daughters." As has been proposed in point 1, the name of every firstborn son in the genealogy is the name of both groom and bride in God's chosen plan. The son who was born male from his mother's womb would later, in God's providential time, be revealed as male and female. The name then is the name of a marriage of both groom and bride, male and female, whom God had created for each other. This appears to explain why in the genealogy, after the constant refrain of a firstborn son being born in a certain year of his father's life, the text goes on each time to add that his father had other sons and daughters, when apparently only a son had been mentioned before. The term other is found in the Revised Standard Version and several other English translations. It is the implied meaning of the Hebrew text, although the term other is not explicitly mentioned. It is as if the author wants the reader to see that in the firstborn son mentioned by name, there is also a potential daughter for the father, the future bride of his son. The son, as mentioned above, would be revealed later as son and daughter when the marriage that God had predestined was revealed. The son's bride would, in addition, be his sister, the daughter of his father and mother. How a child was born. The child, of course, was born male, a son, and when the division into male and female took place are questions which will be asked and need clarification. Apparently, the realization of the couple as male and female took place when the son left his father and mother to form a new home, as is implied in Genesis chapter 2, verses 23 to 24, where it states, "Then the man said, This at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore a man leaves his father and his mother, and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh." A brief commentary now follows on these two important verses in Genesis. The inspired author, whom tradition holds to be Moses, writing a considerable period of time later, when the nuptial blessing was lost, states the primary reason for marriage. Therefore, the author writes, the two become one body in the conjugal act, and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh, so as to mirror what God had graced in the beginning. The two become one in order to make present that which God had graced in the beginning, when the one became two. And this graced moment happened when, as the author wrote in Genesis chapter 2, a man leaves his father and mother. Later it will be seen when Christ also leaves his father and mother upon his death on Mount Calvary. His bride is revealed in the blood and water that flowed from his side, which several of the early church fathers described as the new Eve formed for the new Adam.
The third point of note in the genealogy concerns the striking manner in which Noah and his family, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, are mentioned. For Noah's family alone, the important refrain, "and had other sons and daughters," that is found throughout the entire genealogy is omitted. The inspired author ends the genealogy abruptly by saying, after Noah was 500 years old, Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The author does not continue to say for how long Noah lived after the birth of his sons, and omits the phrase that he had other sons and daughters, as was done in each generation before. Something happens during the time of Noah which alters the carefully designed structure of the genealogy, and which the author wishes us to take notice of. The special nuptial blessing bestowed upon Seth's descendants appears to be taken away. It is this blessing also which apparently Jesus called to mind when he addressed his disciples on the Mount of Olives on Tuesday of Holy Week. Jesus said to them, as is described in St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 24, "As it was in Noah's day, so will it be when the Son of Man comes. For in those days before the flood, people were eating, drinking, taking wives, taking husbands, right up to the day Noah went into the ark. And they suspected nothing till the flood came and swept them all away." We might remember that in the blessed line of Adam to Noah, the husband did not take or choose a wife, or the wife take or choose a husband, as God had providentially chosen the husband and wife for each other. The flood was unleashed in the time of Noah, when the marriage that man had chosen was preferred to that which had been blessed by God. This leads us into the subject matter of the next segment, which we'll be studying, entitled Noah and Four Marriages Saved on the Ark.
Before examining this final segment concerning Noah and the four marriages saved on the ark, we will look at the fourth point of note on the genealogy, entitled "The special format of the genealogy is found later again in Genesis, where it ends with Abraham." The special form of wording that we have seen in the genealogy of Genesis chapter 5, whereby other sons and daughters are mentioned when only a son had been named before, is found once again in another important genealogy in Genesis chapter 11, verses 10 to 26. This genealogy traces the lineage of Noah through his son Shem, and, extending over 10 generations, ends with the birth of Abraham. It is at this point the solemn refrain ends. The reason for which the solemn refrain ends will be examined in the next segment, the final talk in this series. Something happens in the time of Abraham which brings an end to the nuptial blessing of the Garden of Eden, which has been passed on to Adam's descendants, as has been stated repeatedly in the fallen state. From the time of Abraham onwards, this blessing will only be open to the eyes of faith, beginning with our father in faith, Abraham. This may well explain why the Gospel of St. Matthew, the first Gospel, begins by presenting a genealogy of our Redeemer Jesus Christ, going all the way back to Abraham. The genealogy, once closed in the time of Abraham, is now being reopened with the coming of Christ. Having presented this genealogy at the beginning of his Gospel, the evangelist curiously recalls the fruitful but virginal union of Joseph to Mary, his spouse. Mary, who is so often described by the saints of the Church as the new Eve. In the nuptial union of Joseph and Mary, the hope of reopening the Garden of Eden has dawned upon the world. This reopening will take place on Mount Calvary, in the blood and water flowing from the side of Jesus on the cross, which several of the early church fathers described as the new Eve formed from the side of the new Adam. You might wish to use the pause button now to look at the screen. The point simply to be noted here, however, is the unique manner with which the author presents the early genealogies in Genesis, which appear to contain a great nuptial mystery, ends in the time of Abraham. Let us now proceed to our final segment, Noah and the 4 marriages saved on the ark.